What's up guys, how's it going? And welcome to my build of the month for August 2018. This is a mini-itx build with a B450 motherboard, so it's built for Ryzen processors. And the focus for today I think is going to be not on the build process itself. I just recently did a how to build video, so check that out if you want the actual step-by-step procedures. But I want to focus on the flexibility of this build as I go through stuff, because there are parts you could swap in or out for more or less money and more or less performance. So there's a lot of things that could be changed. I'm going to start by going over the parts that I chose at the beginning of this month on my monthly builds video, and I'll focus on sort of the options that you have in each category.
Excellent!
The Enermax Liquitech TR42 all-in-one liquid CPU cooler has a massive contact plate made just for Threadripper and is rated for 500 watts of heat dissipation. High-pressure PWM fans mount to rubber channels on the radiator to absorb vibration, and the sexy logo and edge lighting on the block is addressable for syncing with your motherboard. It comes with an RGB control box too, so click the sponsor link in the description for more. So based on the feedback I got last month, the first choice for this build was the case, and that is because everyone wanted to see a mini-itx build. I chose the Ryotoro CR280 because it costs around $55 or $60. It's mini-itx, and it is small. There's a lot of mini-itx cases that are on the larger size. There's also thin mini-itx cases that are a little bit more limited on expansion capabilities. This one is small, still has the same layout that most standard ATX cases has, and it fits full-size ATX power supplies, which means we have a little bit more flexibility in our choice there. The power supply I'm using today is the EVGA 650 GQ. It's not the exact one I chose in the builds video, but the primary requirements were 550 to 650 watts, 80 plus bronze or gold rated, and then I also chose one that was partially modular and has all black cables, so we won't have any nasty ketchup and mustard cables going on, messing with our color scheme. Other than the mini-itx form factor, I knew I wanted to go with Ryzen with this build, and that's simply because I feel like you get the most bang for your buck when you're actually buying Ryzen mainstream processors right now. I'm going with the Ryzen 2700X today, which is the fastest second-gen Ryzen processor, but my recommendation was just to find the cheapest 8-core Ryzen that you could if you're going for a higher-end build like this one, which is going to cost you around $1,200 total for all the parts. There's also a lot of new B450 motherboards that have just launched, and this is the slightly more budget option when it comes to Ryzen processors. You can still overclock, so no problems there. And I was recommending a B450 mini-itx motherboard in the $110 to $120 range. This is a brand new board from Gigabyte, the B450i Aorus Pro Wi-Fi. I think I'm one of the first to be able to build in it. It has an M.2 expansion slot for high-speed SSDs. It has the B450 chipset, which means it's overclockable. It's also got 802.11 AC Wi-Fi and USB 3.1 Gen 2. What memory kit to use is often one of the biggest questions with the Ryzen build, because they can be finicky about running memory at faster speeds, but you do want faster speed memory in order to get all of the performance out of Ryzen. So this is the Corsair Vengeance LPX kit I've used for quite a few builds. It's DDR4 3000 speed. It's also low profile and no flashy blingy RGB LEDs or anything like that. It's just solid memory that gets the job done. And if you get this kit, it will be compatible with the XMP setting with Ryzen, so it's pretty easy to set up and get your rated speeds. For storage, I recommended a 480 to 512 gigabyte class SSD, and I definitely recommend an SSD for your main operating system. This is a Toshiba OCZ TR200, which is available for about $90 to $95 right now, but there are definitely other 500 gig class SSDs down in that range, so double check and find one that has a good price, because they go on sale a lot and prices have been dropping. Last component here is a graphics card, and I recommend a GeForce GTX 1070 or 1070 Ti or 1080 right now, and this is very much depending on the prices, because the prices again are in flux. If you're spending $400 or more on your graphics card, you can definitely get a GTX 1070. But for $435 or so, you can get a GTX 1070 Ti, which will be faster, and for $450 or so, you might be able to get a GTX 1080, and those prices maybe even have gotten a little bit better. But any one of these cards you go with will be fast. Just find the one that maybe is on sale right now, or of course the one that will match your color scheme. This one is black and red, and since there are some black and red accents on the case, I think it will fit in just perfectly. This is my first Ryotoro case, actually. I've heard of them, but I have not actually worked with one of their cases before, for about $60 on first glance. It's looking, again, like I like the size. I like that it's small. There's two thumb screws on the back that I've already removed, which is why the side panels are falling off. There's a little T embossed on the side. I don't know what the T is for. Is that the T in Ryotoro? But it does have a small plexi window on the side there. It has some plastic on it to keep it protected. I'm gonna leave that on until I finish the build. Also the T stamped on that side, but it does give you a little bit of a look at the internals. Then we got a couple horizontally oriented drive cages there. It looks like 3.5 inch for both of those. I'm gonna have to do some more figuring out to figure out how these drive trays actually work. They're held on from the bottom with some thumb screws. But if you're looking down here, you might notice there is a bit of a dust filter. Not a fancy one, but this is a relatively inexpensive case. There's also a dust filter across the front. There's a dust filter across the top. The area behind the motherboard tray here has a reasonable amount of space for some cable management, tucking it away down here. There's a little bit less space in the top than in the bottom. There's also a couple 2.5 inch drive mounts back here as well. Also tucked right down in here is another 3.5 inch drive mount. It's just got a release here on the top that would hold it from the sides. So actually 3 3.5 inch drive mounts and 2 2.5 inch drive mounts in this case. And the front panel is actually all metal as well, which is kind of nice actually, not just a plastic facade. And it's got these little catches that hold it in place. There's a Rio Toro logo with just a piece of red backing on it. And I guess our red accents here are just kind of this little piece of tape that goes around the edge. It's enough to give it a highlight, but it doesn't look gaudy or anything like that. Oh, these front dust filters do appear to be removable. 2 front dust filters, individually removable, so it's not bad. They're not the easiest to get back into place, but I'd rather have them there than not. Front panel I/O here, you got a couple USB 3.0 ports as well as mic, headphone jacks, power and reset buttons. And then I appreciate the fact that 220mm fans are included. And then just comparing this to some other like lower end budget cases that I've worked with, you know, it's not like super thick steel or anything, but it doesn't seem like it's too flimsy. And then I do like the fact that there's some little details, like for instance, the rear fan here does have some rubber gaskets in there that it's mounted to just to prevent some vibration from affecting the case. I will say that your expansion slots down here, one of these is a breakaway. This one's a breakaway, so it's one-time use. This is trash now. And then this one is replaceable. That's a little weird to me, but I wonder how much money they saved by doing that. I tweeted a picture of this little motherboard yesterday, and I got a lot of positive feedback on it. I like what Gigabyte has done with the design. There's silver accents on the heatsinks. This also feels like a pretty substantial heatsink right there. I'm not going to speak to the power delivery or anything right now, but I do want to point out that they fixed the location of the 8-pin supplemental CPU power. It used to be like over here on their B350 board in this range, and that was kind of annoying to get to. You got a couple fan headers, a CPU fan over there, and then another fan header down here for case fans. And then they also have both digital LED output right there, so that's your 5-volt 3-pin LED, and then there's also a 4-pin 12-volt standard LED output there as well. Since I chose to use a 2700X, I'm going to be installing the Wraith Prism cooler, which is the highest end stock AMD cooler for Ryzen. This actually installs straight to the plastic brackets that are pre-installed on the socket. If you get a lower end CPU, you might have the standard Wraith Spire cooler like this though. Still a very adequate cooler, just doesn't have the fancy RGB and stuff. This one mounts directly through to the back plate. So you may have seen me mount these coolers before, which involves removing these 2 plastic brackets. This one just has little clips on either side that clip around it, and that's not exactly how you do it, but you'll see in a second. There's constant debate about applying thermal paste in CPU cooling situations. I most often go with the method of just putting a little blob in the middle, a little smaller than the size of a pea. This time I opted to spread the thermal paste around though, and that is because there are actual direct heat pipes on the bottom of this thing, and they have grooves in between them. With direct heat pipe contact, if it's not a uniform flat plate in the middle, sometimes the thermal paste can slip into the grooves and go side to side instead of this way, and basically you won't get the maximum amount of contact between the heat pipes and the thermal paste and the heat spreader on the CPU that you want. So I removed this drive cage. It's got 4 thumb screws on the bottom that hold it in place to the case. And I was trying to figure out, because there's some other like little tabs on here that mount in different places, and little catches and these little stand-up things. I think that's just so you can actually fit those together like that.
which kind of makes sense, and then you could secure it with screws if you wanted. I'm feeling like maybe Rio Toro uses this cage in maybe other cases as well. I was trying to figure out if they have locations in there to move it to other locations or something, but there is no manual that ships with the case. There's just a little card with a QR code on it that takes you to the Rio Toro website, which I found to be not the best experience trying to figure out how these work, but I don't have a 3.5-inch drive anyway, so here are these little drive trays that come with it, just so you guys can get a look, and I'm going to not use this. Just looking at our 2.5-inch drive mount here, they give you these little spacer screws, and these are the mounting points. These are little rubberized inserts here, so I do appreciate that again. Although, you have the issue here where you have to mount the drive through the actual back plane, and there's nothing to remove as far as the tray goes. So this is probably something you want to plan out earlier in the build process, but it does seem like you also have the ability, if you wanted to, there's just enough space to fit the drive on that way. So if you had a drive that was blingy or, you know, lit up or something like that, it does seem like you could mount it here and have it be more visible. So that's kind of nice. Things are coming together here. If you saw when I went over the motherboard, there are 2 fan headers, and we have 3 fans we need to plug in. The CPU heatsink fan, and then the 2 fans from the case. So if you are thinking about putting this build together, I'd recommend getting a little fan splitter. It's just as a little simple PWM guy. This will allow me to plug a single plug into the motherboard fan header, which is right down here. And then I can take both of my 2 fan headers and route them down to that area and plug them both into that same header. Alright guys, so after building extensively in the Corsair 1000D with my Riptide build, I have been very happy to build a nice small computer that I can pick up and move around without too much difficulty. That's also made it easier in the building process. As you can see, I was able to get all the cables tucked back here pretty nicely. There's plenty of tie-down points back here, which I definitely appreciated. Single 480 gig SSD currently installed there, but again, expandability options here. We could add a second SATA 2.5-inch SSD. We could add a 3.5-inch drive down here in the bottom. We could add 2 more 3.5-inch drives up here via those cages, but I will point out that if you do want to max out this case with drives, you'll probably want to opt for a smaller power supply. This one's a little bit long, so it would conflict with those drive cages. Consider a power supply that's maybe 140 to 160 millimeters in length. This one is a little bit longer. I also want to point out that the graphics card here just barely fit. I was able to kind of get it in there at an angle, but it's long enough that it's conflicting with the front second 120 millimeter intake, so I would not be able to add another fan there if I wanted to, unless it was a slim one. So if you're looking at graphics cards, maybe opt for ones that are a little bit smaller. If this card was 3-slot or any bigger, like some of these Asus cards, then it would definitely conflict with the power supply at the bottom as well. So even though this is a very small build, everything fit in there quite nicely, but there were some parts where I was like, wow, this barely fits. Like the space up here for CPU coolers, if this was much wider or fatter, it would probably conflict with this rear 120 millimeter fan. All this is to say, if you're not using these exact parts that I'm using today, double check some of the sizes that you're going to be using just to make sure that everything will actually fit in the system if you're putting together in this case. But now, ladies and gentlemen, I have plugged in the system. flip the power switch on and let's have a quick moment of truth. It works. Wow, like really quiet too, like right out of the gate. Like I can barely hear anything. All the fans are spinning. So now is the point in time where traditional builders, if they have put everything together, done the initial boot to make sure everything is working, can do our quick little peel from our plexi and replace our side panels. So there you have it, guys. My tiny little build in the Rio Toro CR280. About $1,200 gets you an 8-core CPU, a GTX 1070 with 8 gigs of video memory. Overall, a really fast system with an SSD for a boot drive, as well as a ton of expandability for adding more drives, more SSDs in the future. And yes, you could easily use this system to game and stream at the same time, to edit video, as well as a ton of other stuff too. But guys, thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, definitely hit the thumbs up button. I'll put links to all the parts I used down in this video's description, and we'll see you guys next time. Have a good one.